On the cold stone steps of an old library, a 5-year-old girl sat alone, her thin coat no match for the storm. Snow clung to her loose blonde braid as she stared into the white haze, waiting for someone she had never met but somehow trusted completely. Moments later, a tall police officer and his loyal German shepherd emerged through the storm, drawn to her as if by fate. Why was this child waiting for him? How did she know his name? And what desperate truth was hiding behind her calm, serious eyes? Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from today? I hope your day is peaceful, warm, and filled with good things. Ridgehaven, tucked between the long ribs of the Blue Ridge Mountains, was the kind of town that wore winter like a destiny rather than a season. When December storms came, they moved like ancient spirits, slow, wide, and merciless, sweeping through pines and over rooftops until the world stood still under white silence. Tonight, that silence was fractured only by the mournful hum of streetlights flickering against the blizzard's breath. Snow fell so thick it blurred the edges of houses, swallowed footsteps before they could freeze, and turned the world into a pale, swirling dream that smelled of pine resin and cold metal. Officer Elias Rowan, 38, stepped out of the Ridgehaven Police Department with his German Shepherd K9, Ember, padding loyally beside him. Elias had the build of a man forged by both discipline and grief, broad-shouldered, tall, carrying himself with the quiet weight of someone who had spent many winters outrunning the echoes of loss. His face, framed by short brown hair peppered lightly with gray near the temples, held a kind of worn gentleness. His eyes, storm gray, thoughtful, belonged to a man who listened more than he spoke. Once, before tragedy carved its name into him, he had been warm, easygoing, and almost reckless in the way he loved. Years ago, his fiancée, Anna Whitlock, a brave volunteer firefighter, had died during a wildfire rescue mission. That moment had left a permanent seam in his soul. Since then, Elias lived with a quiet restraint, like a man holding his breath for years. He served the town fiercely, but kept everyone at arm's length, including himself. Ember, his 4-year-old German shepherd, seemed made from shadows and gold. She had deep amber eyes full of intuition, thick black and tan fur dusted now with white flakes, and the alert, noble posture of a trained service dog who took her duty as seriously as her human. Ember had been rescued from an abusive previous handler before joining Elias. Her early trauma left her with a deep need to protect the vulnerable. She understood fear in others the way some dogs recognized scents, and she recognized pain inside Elias long before he ever admitted it existed. They made an odd pair, two beings carrying old wounds, held together by loyalty stronger than blood. Tonight, as Elias closed the department's front door behind him, he tugged his scarf higher against the cold and looked toward the nearly invisible outline of his patrol truck. The snow was coming harder, fast enough that even the sheriff had advised everyone to remain inside. But Ridgehaven was understaffed, and Elias often volunteered for late shifts to avoid the emptiness of his home. Ember nudged his leg gently, sensing his fatigue, and Elias managed a faint, lopsided smile. "Another quiet night," he murmured, though blizzards rarely stayed quiet for long. They walked down the sidewalk, boots crunching in fresh snow, the town's Christmas decorations swaying under the storms. Touch. Most businesses were shuttered, their once warm windows now dark. Even the cafe that normally stayed open late had its lights off, chairs stacked against the door. The blizzard was too harsh for anyone to remain outside. At least, that was what Elias thought until the moment Ember froze. Her ears shot forward, her posture sharpened. She stepped slightly in front of Elias, tail stiff, muscles taut in that unmistakable K9 alert. Something, or someone, was ahead. Elias followed Ember's gaze toward the stone steps of Ridgehaven's old public library, a building with cracked columns and arching windows that looked like eyelids half closed in sleep. At first, he thought the shape on the steps was a bundle of discarded blankets or a pile of forgotten donations for the winter shelter. But then the shape moved. A small boot swung. A wisp of blonde hair fluttered. Elias felt a jolt go through him, sharp as ice. Someone was sitting there, a child. He approached slowly, instinctively lowering his posture the way he would when approaching a startled animal. "Ember," he murmured, She eased closer to his side, alert but gentle. As they neared the steps, the little figure came into focus. A small girl, maybe 4 or 5, sitting stiffly on the stone, her legs dangling, her hands tucked into the sleeves of a thin, powder blue coat, clearly not meant for mountain winters. Her hair, a pale golden blonde, was braided loosely with strands escaping to frame a face that should have been rosy with childhood, but instead was ghost pale from cold. Her shoes were worn, gray, and soaked through with slush. But what struck Elias most were her eyes, large, blue, and far too serious for her age. Children should look curious, afraid, shy, or at least expressive, but this child looked like she had been waiting. Elias cleared his throat softly so as not to startle her. "Sweetheart, are you hurt?" The girl lifted her chin, studying his face with unsettling intensity, as if comparing him to an image she had memorized. Ember lowered herself into a calm stance, tail sweeping slowly across the snow, showing the little girl she meant no harm. "You're Officer Rowan," the girl said in a small, steady voice. Elias blinked. "I am. How do you know my name?" She swallowed, her lips quivering with cold. "Mama said you would pass this way. She said you're the one who can help us." Elias felt a shiver, not from the storm, from the certainty in her tone. This was not a frightened child speaking. This was a child following instructions. He crouched, ignoring the cold that soaked instantly into his uniform pants. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Mira," she whispered. "Mira Holloway. Mira." The name struck him gently, like a small bell rung from a distance. "Where's your mother now, Mira?" That was when her composure finally cracked. Her lower lip trembled, tears glimmered but did not fall. "She's at home," Mira said. "She's sick, really, really sick." Elias felt Ember lean against his shoulder, grounding him. "Why didn't she call the station for help?" "She said she couldn't," Mira answered. "She said she needed to talk to you face to face, but she's too sick to walk, so she told me to wait here for you." The wind howled, swirling snow into the shape of a veil around them. Elias gently placed a hand on Mira's shoulder. She was freezing, far too cold for a child to be outside. He immediately shrugged off his patrol jacket and wrapped it around her small frame. It swallowed her completely, but she didn't resist. She simply sank into the warmth with the exhaustion of someone carrying more weight than her tiny shoulders should. "Why me, Mira?" he asked softly. Her answer was simple. "Mama said you're a good man." Ember pressed her head into Mira's side, as if confirming the truth of the statement. Elias let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Whatever this was, whatever storm Mira came from, it was bigger than the one swirling through Ridgehaven's streets. "Can you take me to your mother?" he asked. Mira nodded immediately, slipping her small hand into his. Her fingers were ice cold even through mittens. Elias rose and adjusted his stride to match hers as they began walking through the blizzard, Ember trotting close to Mira's other side like a stray guardian angel made of fur and instinct. As they walked, Elias couldn't help asking, "How long have you been waiting out there?" Mira shrugged, her breath forming small ghosts in the air. "Since you start your shift." Elias exchanged a look with Ember, a silent conversation between a man and a creature who had learned to read each other's fears. This little girl had sat alone in a blizzard because her mother believed he was the only one who could help. As they turned the corner toward Winter Lane, the snow thickened again, and Ridgehaven disappeared into white fog. Mira squeezed his hand a little tighter. "Mama said heroes always show up in stories," she said softly. "But sometimes they show up in storms." Ember barked once, low, gentle, almost like she agreed. And Elias Rowan understood, with a weight that settled into him like falling snow, that this night was the beginning of something he was not prepared for, but something he could not walk away from. The blizzard thickened as Elias Rowan, Mira Holloway, and Ember trudged through the winding streets of Ridgehaven. The town's old buildings blurred into pale silhouettes, their roofs sagging under snow like tired shoulders. Ridgehaven at night always felt small, but under the storm, it seemed to shrink into a pocket of white silence where even sound moved slowly. Elias adjusted his stride to match Mira's tiny steps, his patrol jacket wrapped around her like a cocoon. Ember walked close at her side, occasionally brushing her tail against the girl's leg as if reminding her she wasn't alone. The walk was longer than Elias expected. Children rarely measure distance the same way adults do. What Mira described as a little bit that way turned into 3 winding blocks and a narrow alleyway packed with cars half buried in snow. Elias scanned the dim windows for signs of life. Ridgehaven wasn't dangerous, but poverty had carved deep canyons into certain streets, leaving broken porches, rusted bicycles, and sagging telephone poles marking its scars. "Is it far now?" Elias asked softly. Mira pointed with her mittened hand toward an aging brick building with soot-stained walls and an external fire escape trembling under the weight of ice. "Mama says it's not pretty, but it's home." The building, Winter Lane Apartments, had a past written clearly in its bones. Once an old mill dormitory, it was now a haven for families struggling to get by. People who worked long hours and came home to walls that kept out the cold, mostly because they tried their best. At the entrance, a man in a heavy brown work coat was shoveling snow with a metal scoop whose handle had been repaired with duct tape. He paused, leaning on the shovel as Elias approached. The man looked about 50, tall but slightly stooped, with deep-set brown eyes and wind-chapped cheeks. His beard was patchy and salt and pepper, and he carried the weary patience of someone who had learned not to expect kindness from strangers, but still offered it anyway. "Evenin'," he said, voice rough like gravel. "Storm's bad tonight. Most kids are inside." "This one can't be," Elias replied gently. "She needed help." The man nodded, understanding softening his tired expression. "Name's Tom Avery, maintenance guy here." He glanced toward Mira. "You from 3C, little one?" Mira nodded shyly. Tom's eyes lingered on Elias's badge. "Her mom doing all right tonight?" Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. Tom exhaled, long and tired. "Good woman, quiet, keeps to herself. Doesn't ask for help unless she's desperate." He gave Elias a slow, significant look, one that carried the weight of someone who had seen sickness hollow out many lives in these walls. "If she sent Mira out in this storm, then she's worse than she lets on." Elias felt a familiar tightening in his chest, a mixture of dread and responsibility. Tom pointed upward. "3rd floor. East stairwell sticks sometimes. Watch your step." Snow whipped across the entryway as Elias guided Mira inside. The stairwell smelled faintly of old cooking oil and damp carpeting. Rusted mailboxes lined the wall, most missing name tags. Ember sniffed the air, nose twitching as if mapping every scent that lived here: fear, hope, leftover dinners, maybe even loneliness. As they climbed, Mira leaned closer to Elias. "Mama says the stairs groan like they're complaining." The stairs did groan, creaking under Elias's weight. On the 3rd floor, Mira led him down a narrow hallway where bulbs flickered overhead. She stopped at the door marked 3C, paint peeling, lock slightly crooked. Then she knocked in a pattern, 1 long tap, 2 short, 1 soft. "That's what she taught me," Mira said. "So she knows it's me." The door opened almost immediately. Nora Holloway stood in the doorway, her body braced against the frame, as though even standing had become an act of will. Elias had met sick people before, accidents, trauma victims, overdose cases, but Nora carried her illness like a shadow stitched into her bones. She appeared to be in her early 30s, but her illness aged her. She was tall, once perhaps slender and athletic, but now gaunt beneath her worn sweater. Her ash-brown hair, braided loosely over one shoulder, had lost its shine. Her cheekbones jutted sharply, and her pale skin was tinged with a faint gray. But her eyes, soft brown, intelligent, kind, were steady even though fatigue pulled at their corners. Elias recognized something in them, the quiet courage of someone who had been fighting battles alone for far too long. "Mira," Nora breathed, relief and fear blending in her voice. "Sweet girl, you're freezing. Come inside." Mira hurried in. Ember followed, tail low but cautious. Nora's gaze finally lifted to Elias. Confusion flickered across her face before recognition settled. You really came." Her voice trembled not from illness, but from disbelief. "You asked for help," Elias replied. "I'm here." Inside, The apartment was small but meticulously kept. A tiny Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with paper ornaments and strings of popcorn. The couch was threadbare but clean. The air carried the soft scent of peppermint tea and the sharper smell of medication. Crayon drawings were taped to the refrigerator, most depicting Mira holding hands with a woman who still looked healthy, smiling beneath a bright sun. Nora sat on the edge of the couch, one hand pressed subtly against her chest, as if soothing an invisible ache. "Mira," she whispered, brushing strands of cold hair from her daughter's forehead. "I told you to wait near the library entrance, not on the steps." "I couldn't see you from the bottom," Mira said, her voice trembling. "I wanted to make sure he'd see me." Nora closed her eyes in pain, both emotional and physical. When she opened them again, she looked at Elias with the raw honesty of someone who had run out of time to pretend. "Officer Rowan, I'm sorry for dragging you into this, but I had no one else." She motioned for him to sit. When Elias lowered himself into the old armchair across from her, Ember sat beside his feet, alert but gentle. Nora's gaze softened at the sight of the dog. "She's beautiful," Nora said quietly. "German Shepherd, right?" 4 years old, Elias replied. "Sharp as they come, and stubborn." Ember huffed softly as if confirming the accusation. Nora smiled weakly. "Mira adores dogs. She likes to draw them too. Says they know secrets humans forget." Mira nodded eagerly. "Dogs don't lie," she said. "And Ember didn't bark at me. That means she knows I'm safe." Nora looked at her daughter, then back at Elias. Something in her expression shifted, like a door opening inside her. The exhaustion in her face deepened, revealing how little strength she had left. "Officer Rowan, I didn't send Mira out there lightly," she said. "I'm sicker than I've let anyone know. The doctor says it's getting worse. My heart—" Her voice cracked. "Some days it barely keeps up." Elias leaned forward. "What can I do?" Nora hesitated only a moment before answering. "I didn't ask you here for medicine or money. I called you because Mira needs someone good, someone who won't let her be swallowed by the world when I'm gone." Her words landed heavily. Mira curled into her mother's side, clutching her sleeve. Ember stepped closer, ears tilted with concern. Elias didn't speak, not yet. He needed time. He needed truth. But he understood the depth of the moment. A woman who had nothing left was entrusting him with the one thing she loved most. "Let's take it one step at a time," he said softly. "I'm here now. Tell me everything you need me to understand." And as snow lashed against the windows, the small apartment felt like the sole warm place in the world. 3 souls huddled in a storm of fear, hope, and something new forming quietly between them. The night was only beginning. Elias sat in the dimly lit apartment long enough to feel its heartbeat, soft, uneven, but filled with a stubborn warmth. Snow tapped against the window like restless fingertips. Ember lay at Mira's feet, her black and tan coat glowing faintly in the small room's orange lamplight. The girl ran her fingers through the dog's fur with unconscious trust, as if she had known Ember for years instead of minutes. Nora Holloway leaned back against the couch cushion, fatigue etched into every line of her posture. Her breathing was shallow, each inhale a quiet negotiation with failing strength. Elias watched her closely, his instincts stirred, both as an officer and as a human being who had spent too many nights listening to final breaths in emergency rooms, hospital corridors, and accident scenes. "I won't pretend this isn't strange," Nora began, voice thin but steady. "And I won't blame you if you walk out thinking I've lost my mind." Elias shook his head gently. "You asked for help. That's not madness." She smiled, a tired but grateful smile. "I didn't ask for help. I asked for you." Mira looked up at Elias then, her serious blue eyes searching his face in a way that felt far too wise for a child so young. Ember noticed the shift in tension and lifted her chin, ears twitching. Nora rested a hand on her daughter's hair. "I've never been good at needing people," she said quietly. "I learned that too young." Elias didn't push, but something about her tone told him this story mattered. Nora exhaled shakily. "My parents died in a highway crash when I was 16. It was quick, merciful for them, not for me." Her voice softened. I went into nursing because I wanted to give people the kind of gentleness no one had given me then. She paused, closing her eyes briefly. When Mira was born, I promised myself she would never feel alone. I kept that promise until my body started breaking faster than my will. Mira pressed her cheek against Nora's arm. You're not breaking, Mama. You just need to rest more. Elias felt his throat tighten at the innocence in her voice. Nora took another breath, bracing herself. Officer Rowan, Elias, what I'm about to ask isn't fair, and it isn't small, but I've run out of time to find anyone else. Elias felt Ember shift closer to him, her presence grounding him in a way only a loyal dog could. Go on? Nora's eyes glistened, not with fear, but with something heavier. I want you to take Mira when I'm gone. The words landed with the weight of a falling tree, quiet at first, then echoing through every corner of Elias's mind. He stared at Nora, unable to speak, not because he refused the request, but because he understood its gravity instantly. He knew the shape of loss. He knew how it hollowed lives. Mira's fingers tightened around Ember's fur. I'd be good, she whispered, as if reading his hesitation. I won't make trouble, I promise. Elias swallowed, throat dry. Mira, sweetheart, this isn't about trouble. Nora leaned forward slightly, though the effort drained her. I watched you for years, Elias. Not in a creepy way, she added with a thin laugh. Ridgehaven is a small town. We notice the good ones. She listed them quietly, moments she'd observed. Elias kneeling in the snow to tie a frightened child's shoe. Him delivering food to a shut-in widow after her son stopped visiting. Him protecting Ember during a training yard dispute. Him refusing to back down from officers who bullied the weak in town. Each moment was a thread in a tapestry Nora had stitched in secret. I don't have anyone else, she whispered. No siblings, no cousins. Mira's father left before she was born. I never chased him. Mira deserved better. Elias's heart clenched. He understood abandonment too well. His own father had been a cold man, never physically absent but perpetually distant, present in body but unreachable in spirit. Elias had sworn never to become that kind of man. But he'd also sworn he wouldn't set himself up to fail by letting anyone rely on him too much. After losing Anna, he built his life like a fortress. Nora's next words pierced that fortress like a crack of lightning. I don't care if you think you're not ready. Heroes never are. The storm outside howled as if agreeing. Elias lowered his head, elbows resting on his knees. Ember scooted closer, nudging his thigh. She sensed everything, his fear, his grief, his instinct to protect. Ember had always reacted this way when he faced emotional weight, as if refusing to let him drown in silence. Mira slid off the couch and walked toward him with slow, hesitant steps. When she reached him, she looked up with those same earnest, steady eyes. My mama says you don't quit when someone needs you. Ember's tail brushed gently against Mira's hand. Elias forced a breath. I don't know the first thing about raising a child. Nora's voice softened, almost tender. You know how to show up. That's more than most give. Before Elias could respond, a sudden noise echoed from the hallway. Two male voices murmuring, then footsteps that paused directly outside 3C. Ember's ears shot up. She stood instantly, muscles rigid. Elias's police instinct snapped awake. The doorknob rattled slightly. A muttered curse followed. Nora stiffened. It's them! Who? Elias asked. The new landlord's men, Nora whispered, fear creeping into her voice. They've been harassing tenants for months. He wants to sell the building, but he needs us out first. He's been threatening eviction, illegal ones. Elias rose silently, one hand resting near his belt. Stay behind me. Mira clutched Ember, who positioned herself. Between the child and the door, tail stiff, eyes sharp. The voices outside argued in low tones. One was young, raspy, irritated. The other deeper, mocking. Door's locked. She's still here. Boss said she'd be too weak to fight back. Storm's bad. Let's come back tomorrow. Another curse. Footsteps retreated, fading down the hallway. Elias waited until silence returned before turning back to Nora. How long has this been happening? Couple months, she admitted. I didn't want trouble, and I didn't want them to take notice of Mira, so I tried to ignore it. The anger inside Elias was slow burning, controlled, deliberate. You should have called. She gave him a tired look. I've learned not to expect people to show up for me. Mira's gaze flicked to Elias, then to Ember, then back again, as if silently questioning whether this time would be different. Elias exhaled, long and heavy. Nora, tell me everything. I can't help if I don't understand the full picture. Nora nodded, gathering her remaining strength. I'm losing my heart faster than the doctors predicted. Maybe months, maybe weeks. Every day feels like a borrowed one. She brushed Mira's hair with trembling fingers. And I wake up terrified that Mira will be alone in the wrong world. Ember nudged Mira's cheek. Elias felt something in him shift, subtle but irreversible. Maybe it was Ember's quiet loyalty. Maybe it was Mira's brave, steady eyes. Maybe it was the memory of Anna whispering she wanted him to be a father one day. Or maybe it was simply the truth that some storms aren't meant to be faced alone. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but sure. If you want me to look after Mira, I need to know everything. Medical records, legal documents, whatever you have, and I need your consent in writing. Nora's eyes widened with relief so raw it almost hurt to witness. You'll consider it? Ember nudged Elias's knee as if pushing him toward the right answer. I won't make promises I can't keep, he said carefully. But I'm here, and I'm not walking away. Mira pressed her face against Ember's fur and whispered, I knew it. Nora covered her trembling mouth, tears slipping free, not from sadness, but from hope. The storm outside raged, pushing against the thin apartment windows like a creature desperate to be heard. But inside, something quieter took root, a fragile pact, a possibility, a new beginning born from desperation, and the belief that even strangers could become salvation. And for the first time since entering the apartment, Elias felt the shape of the path ahead. It was frightening. It was enormous. But it was right. The next morning broke without sunlight, only a heavy gray sky pressing down on Ridgehaven, as if the storm had taken the day hostage. Snowdrifts piled high against the worn brick of Winter Lane apartments, and icicles clung to the gutters like frozen fangs. The heater in 3C rattled weakly, doing its best to warm the cramped living room where Elias Rowan sat at the wobbly kitchen table, medical documents spread before him like grim chapters of an unfinished book. Ember lay at his feet, head rested on her paws, amber eyes tracking every movement he made. Nora Holloway was still asleep in the bedroom, her breathing uneven but peaceful. Mira sat beside her mother's door, hugging a small stuffed rabbit with a bent ear. The toy looked exhausted, threadbare in places, but it was clearly loved. Mira was still wearing one of Elias's spare sweaters, the sleeves hanging long over her hands. She kept glancing at the documents on the table, as if sensing the story they told even without reading. Elias rubbed his eyes and exhaled slowly. The report from Ridgehaven General was blunt. Advanced cardiomyopathy, progressive heart failure, limited mobility, high-risk arrhythmia. Nora's condition was irreversibly declining. He felt Ember's nose bump his knee, a small reminder that he wasn't facing this alone. A soft knock broke the silence. Elias rose, instinctively placing himself between the door and the people behind him. Ember stood immediately, tail low, stance alert. Elias opened the door only a crack. Standing outside was a woman bundled in a thick maroon coat, carrying a plastic grocery bag filled with canned soup, bread, and a bottle of children's vitamins. She looked to be in her early 60s with a small frame and expressive brown eyes behind square glasses. Her hair, a soft silver gray, was braided neatly down her back. She wore wool mittens hand-knitted with green pine tree patterns. "Officer Rowan?" she asked in a gentle voice. "I'm Alma Ridley, Nora's neighbor." She smiled kindly, but her face held a deep weariness. "I heard voices late last night. Thought I'd check on her." Elias stepped aside. "Come in, ma'am." Alma entered with the slow, steady gait of someone whose knees had carried many winters. She had the warmth of a grandmother, but the sharpness of someone who had learned survival the hard way. Alma lived alone on the second floor. She'd moved into Winter Lane after losing her husband to illness 5 years prior, and the grief had carved patience and empathy into her like water shaping stone. When she saw Mira, her eyes softened. "Hey, sweetheart, how's your mama today?" Mira shrugged, hugging the rabbit tighter. "She's sleeping." Alma gave her a gentle pat on the head, then turned to Elias. "Nora doesn't like asking for help. She's proud." Her voice wavered. "Too proud sometimes." Elias nodded. "I've gathered that." Alma placed the groceries on the counter. "I bring her food when I can. She always says she'll pay me back. I always tell her the same thing. You don't owe me anything except letting me help." Elias could see the sincerity in the woman's eyes, the kind that couldn't be faked. "She told you anything about those men in the hallway?" Elias asked. Alma's expression tightened immediately. "Daryl Kane's people, they've been showing up more often these weeks, knocking on doors, pretending they're inspectors, trying to scare us." She shook her head, voice thick with frustration. "They want this building empty. If they can't evict legally, they'll intimidate. He's got influence in the sheriff's office, so no one stops him." Elias clenched his jaw. He knew corruption existed in the pockets of the department. It was the reason he never built friendships with half the deputies. The sheriff, Clayton Morse, was a man shaped by ambition more than duty, broad-shouldered and quick-tempered, the type who measured respect by fear. He wasn't evil, just self-preserving, which often meant turning a blind eye where justice demanded eyes wide open. The situation was worsening faster than Elias anticipated. A sound stirred from the bedroom, the rustle of sheets, then a soft cough. Mira hurried inside. Elias followed, Alma close behind. Nora was sitting up, pale as winter light. She looked smaller than the night before, as if sleep had stolen more strength instead of restoring it. Her hair clung to her forehead, damp from fever. But when she saw Elias, a faint smile lifted the corner of her lips. "You're still here?" she whispered. "I said I wouldn't walk away." Nora's eyes shimmered. "Thank you." Alma approached her bedside. "Brought you groceries. You need to keep eating." Nora laughed softly. "You spoil me." Alma huffed. "You deserve it." Mira crawled into the bed beside her mother, curling up carefully so as not to hurt her. Ember placed her chin on the edge of the mattress, watching them with a protective stillness. Nora took Mira's hand. "Did you worry when I slept too long, baby?" Mira shook her head. Officer Rowan was here, and Ember too. Nora nodded slowly, then turned to Elias. "We heard voices in the hallway last night." "I know," Elias replied. "They won't bother you again, not while I'm here." Nora's breathing grew shallow for a moment. Fear, not for herself, but for Mira, flickered behind her eyes. "I don't want them dragging her out of here if something happens when I'm alone." Elias knelt beside the bed. "I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen." Nora hesitated, tears welling. "I'm not just asking you to protect her home." Her voice cracked. "I'm asking you to be her home." Before he could answer, the hallway erupted with shouting, heavy boots stomping, a harsh knock on the apartment next door. Ember's ears shot up. Mira flinched and buried into her mother's side. Elias stood immediately. Alma reached for Mira as if ready to shield her. A deep male voice boomed through the hallway. "Open the door! Last warning!" Nora winced. "It's them again." Elias moved silently to the peephole. Two men stood outside apartment 3D. The larger one, with a shaved head and navy bomber jacket, pounded on the door with a closed fist. His stance was aggressive, shoulders squared. The smaller one, wiry with sharp features, scanned the hallway quickly. He had small, restless eyes, predatory, suspicious. Elias estimated mid-30s, likely ex-construction or warehouse workers hired for muscle. He recognized the larger man, Bradley Sykes, a local enforcer known for working under shady property owners. Broad jaw, broken nose, tattoo on the neck, intimidation made flesh. The kind of man who confused cruelty with authority. The smaller man, Dean Merlot, was slicker. Narrow face, thin lips, hands fidgeting constantly. The kind who smiled when trouble started. Both were trouble. Elias cracked the door open, stepping into the hall. "That's enough," he said. Both men turned. Recognition flared in Bradley's eyes. "Officer Rowan," he growled. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Well, I'm here, and you're harassing tenants again." Dean shrugged. "They're behind on payments. Boss says we handle it." "You're handling nothing," Elias replied. "You come back without legal paperwork. I'll arrest both of you for intimidation and trespassing." Bradley towered over Elias, but there was something steadier in Elias's stare, something carved from years of pushing through fire and grief. Bradley stepped back. Dean snorted. "You're alone, Rowan. Sheriff's not going to back you." Elias didn't blink. "I don't need the sheriff. I need the law. And right now, you're breaking it." Ember appeared in the doorway behind him, growling low, fur bristling. Bradley and Dean looked at the dog and thought better of pushing further. They retreated with muttered curses, boots echoing as they descended the stairs. Elias shut the door behind him. Nora was trembling. "This is getting worse." Elias nodded. "Which is why we're not staying here." Nora frowned. "I can't move. I can barely breathe some days." "Mira," Elias said softly, turning to the child, "would you like to come stay with me and Ember for a little while? Somewhere warm, somewhere safe?" Mira glanced at her mother. Nora, exhausted but relieved, nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Take her, please." Mira hugged her mother tightly, then Ember nuzzled both of them, offering comfort the way only a dog can. Silent, loyal, absolute. Elias's heart tightened at the sight. He realized then, this wasn't temporary. This was the beginning of something permanent. The wind howled through Ridgehaven, like a warning carried from the mountains, shaking the old apartment windows as Elias Rowan helped Mira into her coat. The girl moved quietly, obediently, her small fingers gripping her stuffed rabbit with a seriousness that belonged to someone older than 5. Ember stood beside her, tail low, watchful, sensing the shift in the air. The tension, the fear, the unspoken goodbye lingering in the room like a fragile scent. Nora Holloway sat propped up on pillows on the couch, wrapped in a pale blue blanket. The morning light filtering through the curtains cast a soft glow across her face, highlighting the pallor that illness had etched deep into her skin. Despite the exhaustion hollowing her cheeks, she was smiling, a small, sad, proud smile. "You'll be all right, baby," she whispered as Mira stepped closer. "Officer Rowan is going to take you somewhere warm, somewhere safe." Mira nodded, though her chin trembled. She climbed onto the couch and pressed her forehead against her mother's cheek. "You'll be okay too, Mama." The lie was gentle. Nora didn't correct it. She simply held her daughter, breathing her in like someone memorizing the scent of home. Elias stayed back, giving them the privacy they deserved, though his heart ached at the sight. He knew grief. He knew the thin line between strength and surrender. And he felt again that deep, heavy truth. This little girl was about to lose the most important person in her world. Alma Ridley waited near the door, her maroon coat buttoned up, hands folded over the grocery bag she had brought earlier. She looked older today, worn by worry, by sorrow, by the kind of compassion that demanded pieces of one's spirit. She had the expression of someone who had lived too many goodbyes. "She'll follow you," Alma said softly to Elias. "And I'll check on Nora every day. She won't be alone." Nora looked up from the couch. "Alma's been a blessing," she whispered. "One of the few reasons Mira and I made it this far." Alma brushed away tears she pretended weren't there. "Don't speak like that," she said in a trembling voice. "You fight the way you've been fighting. You hear me? I'll keep bringing you soup until you're sick of me." Nora laughed, a weak sound, but real. "No one gets sick of you." Mira hugged her mother one last time. "I love you," she said, voice small but fierce. "I love you more," Nora whispered back. "Be brave and kind, always." Mira kissed her mother's cheek. Ember stepped closer and pressed her warm head against Nora's knee, offering a silent farewell only dogs could give, honest, wordless, instinctive. Nora placed a trembling hand on Ember's head. "Take care of them," she murmured. Ember gave a quiet huff, as if promising exactly that. Elias knew it was time. He gently took Mira's hand. "Ready?" She nodded, though she didn't let go of her rabbit. As they stepped into the hallway, Elias turned back. Nora watched them from the couch, her eyes glassy, her breath shallow but steady. She raised her hand in a wave. Elias lifted his own. He would see her again, soon. He would come back for her, bring food, clean the apartment, take care of whatever needed taking care of. But deep in his chest, he knew the clock was running faster than anyone wanted to admit. Outside, the blizzard had mellowed into a soft, steady snowfall. The world seemed hushed, as if mourning something quietly. Elias carried Mira down the stairs, Ember trotting close, and Alma followed to lock up behind them. They reached the patrol truck. Elias opened the back door and lifted Mira inside. Ember climbed up after her, nudging the girl gently with her nose. Mira wrapped her arms around Ember's neck and finally let a tear slip down her cheek. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," Elias said, fastening her seatbelt. "But you're not alone, I promise." He meant it more deeply than he had expected. As they drove through Ridgehaven toward Elias's cabin, the snow-covered road stretched ahead like a blank page waiting for a new story. Mira gazed out the window, silent. Ember sat beside her, leaning in, tail wrapped around Mira's leg for comfort. When they reached the cabin, a sturdy wooden home nestled between tall pines. The wind had quieted. Smoke rose gently from the chimney. The porch light cast a golden glow across the snow. It looked warm, safe, ready. Mira stepped inside cautiously, eyes widening at the open living room, the stone fireplace, the shelves lined with books and old photographs. Elias had never thought of it as a place for children. It had always been too quiet, too clean, too empty. Until now. Ember bounded ahead, circling the room with proud energy, as if showing Mira the space she would now belong to. Mira followed slowly, touching the armchair, the edge of the fireplace, the bookcase, exploring silently, absorbing everything. Elias placed a kettle on the stove. "How about some hot cocoa?" Mira nodded, still quiet, still unsure. While the water warmed, she walked toward the mantel where one picture sat alone, a framed photo of Anna Whitlock, Elias's late fiancée. She was tall, athletic, with sun-kissed skin and bright hazel eyes. Her hair was tied back in a messy braid, and her smile was wide, fearless, full of life. Mira pointed. "She looks kind." Elias paused. She was. "What happened to her?" "A fire," Elias said softly. "She was very brave." Mira nodded as if understanding something unspoken. "Mama says brave people don't disappear. They stay in our hearts." Elias swallowed hard. "Your mom is right." They spent the rest of the evening settling in. Mira picked a blanket from the closet, one with blue stitching, and curled on the couch with Ember pressed close to her side. Elias made cocoa, adding extra marshmallows when he realized she liked them. For a moment, the cabin felt different, warmer, fuller, alive, in a way he hadn't felt since Anna's death. Later, after tucking Mira into the small guest bedroom and leaving Ember curled at her feet, Elias stepped outside into the quiet snowfall. The world was still, the trees heavy with ice, the mountains dark against the sky. He pulled out his phone and called Alma. "How's Nora?" he asked. Alma's voice trembled. "Very tired, but peaceful. She said knowing Mira is safe gives her something she needed. Tell her I'll come by tomorrow." "I will," Alma whispered. "Good night, Officer Rowan." "Good night." When Elias hung up, he let out a slow breath that fogged in the cold. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't obligation. This was a beginning, a fragile, frightening, beautiful beginning. Inside the cabin, Mira shifted in her sleep, and Ember lifted her head alert but calm, ears perked in the soft glow of the bedside lamp. A storm had brought them together, and something gentler, hope, perhaps, was keeping them there. In the end, this story reminds us of something simple but deeply true. God works in quiet ways, often through ordinary people who choose compassion over comfort. Sometimes his miracles do not arrive with thunder or bright light. Sometimes they come in the shape of a tired police officer, a loyal German shepherd, or a small child brave enough to walk through a storm with faith in her heart. In our own lives, we face struggles that feel too heavy to carry alone. Yet every day God places people in our path who can help guide us, strengthen us, or simply stand beside us in the cold. If we open our eyes and our hearts, we begin to see His hand in the smallest moments, in the kindness of a stranger, in the courage to do what is right, and in the love that grows where we least expect it. If this story touched you, I invite you to share it with someone who needs a reminder that they are not alone. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel for more stories of hope, and tell us where you are watching from. And if you believe God still sends quiet miracles into this world, write Amen in the comments. May God bless you and everyone you love today and every day.